Hey guys, it's Matt. This video is not about the new Spike Lee documentary, NYC Epicenters, as much as it's about how the system will use Spike Lee's new documentary, NYC Epicenters, to accomplish exactly what it wants. Note if you're driving or just listening, you don't need to see these thumbnails of a few other tabs, a Slate magazine article. You don't need to see it. This is a re-record, guys, because I immediately started to lose. I felt I would lose a lot of people if I didn't back up and explain the absolute basics. It's going to take a while to get into this. This is how they're going about this reveal is extremely interesting. I don't have it figured out at this point, but I figured I'd jump right into this video and look to your comments and definitely do a part 2 on this, and whatever the conclusions may evolve as the video goes on. But this is going to be a slow process. Grab the handle on your lazy boy, smoke them if you got them. Have to start with the basics. Okay, Spike Lee, I think maybe this week, releases a new documentary on HBO Max called NYC Epicenters, 9/11, and there's an arrow that goes to 2021 and a half. Now, episode 1, I watched, and it was the most difficult thing I've ever watched in my entire life. The frequency was toxic. It was toxic from the start. The first now, and I as I was pulling it up, I was going, please let it be, 4 parts of 30 minutes each. It's something like 4 parts, of which part 1 I think is available now, and only part 1. It was 2 hours. I went, oh no, 2 hours for part 1. I had to fast forward through a lot of it. It was that toxic. But the first, let me just, again, this is going to take a while to play out, guys. And the reason you might want to stick with this is part 4, apparently Spike brings in Richard Gage and all the 9/11 architects and engineers, and he starts dropping the bomb on basically the conspiracy stuff that we pursued around Building 7 and all that. He starts going down the conspiracy route for, I'm going to have to keep saying, the 7-Eleven job application. I don't know what I can get away with. Matt, don't you understand that Biden knows exactly what you're saying at this point? Well, maybe it does. Maybe it just laughs every time I say the 7-Eleven job application. But I'm going to continue to apply the hobo code, and I'm only going to mention the words when it's in context, like the title of Spike Lee's documentary. But in part 4, apparently, and we'll look at the Slate magazine, and people are up in arms because Spike has joined the ranks of the conspiracy theorists. Sure he has. Now, let's go back to the absolute basics. There is no bigger puppet and minion of this system that exists anywhere in the world than Spike. It's not, translation, it's not possible for Spike at any point in his lifetime to turn over a new leaf and he's going to now help us. He's going to now be one of us. It's just not possible. If something comes through Spike, it's exactly what the system wants to come out. There is no, we're not 99% sure of that. It's 100%. I haven't seen episode 4. I don't think it's out yet. But if he starts talking about all the conspiracy, he starts focusing on Building 7 and this and that, he's not, let's get one thing absolutely clear. He's doing exactly what the system wants. So the question is not that Spike's out to help us. It's why is the system revealing this stuff now, basically pushing it into the mainstream? All right. And I don't know what's going to come out regarding Spike citing Richard Gage and architects and engineers for truth and all that stuff that's coming out in episode 4. So we might have to reserve that. Just know it can't be good because he will always serve the system. Maybe we keep going back to revelation of the method, and they have to reveal truth, and we keep going there because we keep running back to first grade and spouting that out, or Matt, you keep spouting that out because I don't have it figured out yet, but that's part of it. It doesn't matter. Let's just get into this slowly. So I watched this thing. I'm hoping it's going to be 30 minutes, and it turns out to be 2 hours, and I'm going, oh no. The first, I don't know, say hour and a half is nothing but endless interviews with people on the front lines in New York, in the hospitals and triage centers and the sea, and all the stories of the first responders. And the atmosphere couldn't be more toxic. I had to skip through a lot of it. It was just interview after interview, mask after mask after mask after, and then okay, all right, well this is okay, and I thought to myself, he's going to do 2 hours on this, and it's just let's interview this nurse. Oh, you should have seen our triage, and we're begging the governor for ventilators, and just the same old, same old. All right. Now, right at about an hour and a half in of 2 hours, maybe even a little bit before, it just flipped a switch and turned into a police officers are out to harm young black youth, and police officers are out of control, and all of the events and the I can't breathe and the the BLM and the protests, and just every white police officer, of course, just wakes up in the morning looking for a reason to go kill a person of color. It just immediately turned into the Rodney King back half, if you want to call it. It just flipped a switch, like whoop. Now it's into race, all about race, all about the police target. I mean, it just what? It was like, well, I didn't. First of all, when I'm watching, I didn't know it was 4 parts. I didn't know, but I went, what is going on here? So it's bizarre. It's just completely bizarre. So let me just go back and just so you don't have to watch it, a few more minutes on the front half to explain exactly what was presented. And guys, this is a big system reveal. So, again, I'm going to try to give you an idea of what's going on in this documentary without you having to have to watch it. The first hour and a half is just on the sea. And I don't know if they interviewed 100 people, 150. It was an endless number of people. And it was 2, 4, 5-minute segments, very short segments, some even shorter, where, okay, here are 2 nurses from whatever, Episcopal Hospital. And every single time, it was the same format. They would introduce the people about to be interviewed. They would show them behind, it looks like a little set where they would be brought in to be interviewed, always to start in the mask. Now, if they interviewed 150 people, 150 people were introduced with their name and their job title, lead nurse at this hospital with the mask on. 100%. Now, they would cut away and then they would cut back in 5 or 10 seconds, or Spike would cut back and then it would be off and you'd see the person's face. But every single time, so 150 interviews, 150 people sitting in a chair fully with the mask. Then when they started talking, when they cut away and came back, it would come down. I mean, it was, well, let's just get into what the purpose of how the presentation was made. Do that later. So it's an hour and a half of just one horror story after another. This is the lead epidemiologist, or this. Usually it was more about on the ground people, first responders, nurses in the New York City hospitals, doctors in the New York City hospitals, and saying, we knew it was really bad when, in April of 2020 this happened, and every bed was full and every room was full, and we had to push people into overflow space. And just like every story, one after the other, to cement the official narrative. Then, like I said, about an hour and a half in, it just like somebody pulled a lever. It just went right to race issues, racism, injustice, police out of control, hunting down of young people of color. I mean, it was bizarre. It's like, what? And then we wonder, well, what's he going to talk about in episodes 2, 3, 4 when he gets to the 7-Eleven job application and all the Richard Gage Architects for 9/11 Truth stuff he's presenting in episode 4? I'm going to have to sit through these other episodes. Oh my gosh, that makes my stomach turn. Then I'm going to have to sit through this. But it was just bizarre. Now, of course, in a way, though, it's not bizarre because Spike, even if it's a 4-part documentary and he's eventually going to get to all the race stuff, he can't probably put out any part. It's his role in this reality system will always be only about race, pushing racial injustice. He serves the system, of course, by creating more racism. We'll ponder some other time how in on it he is. I think absolute puppets like this know very little about how the reality system works. But yeah, if he knows deep down, his role, and he's paid very well to throw gasoline on the flame in this regard. In the end, I still believe he probably, if you put him on a lie detector, he really believes that he's fighting the man, he's helping racial injustice. I don't think he ever made that final backroom conversation. I think he's a complete puppet. But of course, we can look down at it and very easily see that his role is to simply create racism. There's nothing he's ever done that has ever, and I mean ever, helped race relations. Everything the system does, from A to Z, always, at the end of the day, creates more racism under the guise of trying to help. If you want to end racism, you just, remember we talked about, you look what the system does and you just do the opposite. The system constantly, is convinced everybody that you just show the injustice, and most of the injustice, guys, at the highest levels that make the news are, I don't even want to say it. I don't believe everything I see on the news. Let's just put it that way. I don't want to go there. I want this video to get out, or so a lot of it is it's, let's just say, maybe not cooked up, but they'll fan the flames. All right, that's what the system does. So let's not overanalyze it. If Spike Lee is going to have a 2-hour part 1 in a major documentary, it's not possible for him not to fulfill his role for the system and turn a big chunk of it into a race thing and to fan the flames on that. It's simply, his role as Agent Smith in this, and Agent Smith has to be Agent Smith, and that, of course, even if he originally had planned to get to the race part in part 2 or 3, like no, that's got to be a major part of part 1. Spike, you can't do anything for 2 hours without okay, we understand his role. So before getting into the Slate article about how up in arms they are about what Spike is he's about to actually take the side of the conspiracy theorists. Let's just back up. Let me go over to this poster. And just for pause, and before we get into the details again of the Slate article, try to remember the more important part of this video is ultimately what the system is out to accomplish. And most notably, here we go again, the tying together, I should mention this in the first 10 seconds of this video, the tying together of the two major events, which, you and I, we tied them together immediately. We tied them together in the Sade video, how the buildings look like what, and we know that they're tied together. But this really, not that we needed to see this, but this really cements, right in the title itself, NYC epicenters, 9/11 arrow, 2021 and a half. And for those that can't see, should have mentioned this in the first 10 seconds, you have the beams of light going up from the footprints, the beam of light tribute from WTC 1 and 2. But then you have these, in the same sort of light, you have all this, the Spike Lee balls, the symbol of the sea that's been on the news and shown to everyone's subconscious and unconscious and conscious mind. And they've shown that symbol, that image of the V, 100 million times through all forms of media since it started, 100 million times conservatively. So there's these, I don't know if you can't see it, these etheric balls of light all dancing around the two beams of light going up from the footprint of building 1 and 2. But these are the spiked protein, or the ball. It just, so what's being said here, I don't want to spend too much time on it right now. Maybe we need to, this is more like stuff to close with, and we'll get in the Slate magazine. But see, the first thing I notice is the beams of light, that was a tribute to, remember they installed the big giant light, the way they would put the bat signal up into the clouds. They installed them in the footprint of, that tribute. The beams of light went up like the WTC formed the two pillars. And, but they also have, in the same sort of light, they have all the dancing balls of, of what the image is, the Spike Lee. And is there a relationship between Spike Lee and what's going on? The way the reality works, yes. That is, that's way out there. I know, and I don't know if we'll even get to that. But this is not a real reality, guys. It's just too much of this. Okay, let's just do a little diatribe. I mean, the world isn't real. Okay, we have to do this every time. 90% of the truthers they'll like listening to this and ponder it, but they still will never really go where I'm going, and they'll still hold on to how was the architecture really built and all that stuff. Let me just let's just do a tiny little sub segment here. What are the chances? I could just pull the book out and we could do what are the chances for 50 pages in a row. What are the chances, I'll add this one, that the number one person that pushes race issues in media and movies, and I was going to say TV, whatever, the number one racial advocate, quote, advocate, obviously it's to stir it up. His name is Spike Lee, okay? Number one guy that's concerned for race, and these whole movies are based on just trying to help. Okay, what's the name of the lead general in the Civil War? What's the name of him? Robert E. Lee. Lee. So the number one guy fighting for the ultimate definition of racism, slavery, the number one guy that represents all that, has the same last name as the number one guy who's fighting it. So you go the complete ends of the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you have a guy not just pushing racism, pushing for full slavery and fighting of wars to keep slavery. Then you all the way down the other end of the spectrum is a guy he's using modern warfare, the movies, to fight it, supposedly. Of course, he's just creating it, but his name's Lee too. It's just the way the reality system works. Obviously, there's a bunch of you go, oh, well, that's a petty coincidence you've attached to, Matt. In that one sense, it is a petty coincidence, but not when you've seen it, this sort of thing, thousands and thousands of times. Okay, do you want to hang with me for the next 50 hours where I could just push this video to 50 hours where I can just do the entire list? It's just, I'm saying we've seen this sort of thing over and over again. And what's his first name? Spike. What's the symbol of this thing regarding the ball and the spiked protein? What? This presenter was making sense. You're actually saying there's a connection? Yes. I don't. Now, in some cases, I'll be wrong about this, but again, these are two ridiculous one-off examples. But not when we've seen this sort of thing, how the reality system does business thousands and thousands of times. When you see this sort of impossible synchronicity and these bizarre connections, then I don't put stock in how a freaking cathedral was built, if you see what I'm saying. Yeah, when I say of course I support the impossible architecture, because there's no way it could be built with guys with pulleys and this and that. But that doesn't, I'm still in saying there's no way it can be built, then, how I'm going to say it was built is a whole lot. I'm not just looking for more ways and different types of pulley systems. I'm saying the whole reality system isn't very real. And obviously, the Spike Lee name relations is not the strongest of arguments in that regard, but it is if you've been here like the old guard and now seen this 10,000 times. Okay, before the Slate magazine article, I didn't complete my thought on what I was presenting. I was saying these beams of light. Remember, that's a tribute, and if the ball, the spiked Lee ball, here hanging in the air etherically like the beams of light is the same sort of light, which it is, that's also a tribute. What is a tribute? See, forget the balls for now. We'll just look at the two columns. Any sort of a tribute, we've talked about this in the past, people don't even understand this. Well, people will never understand this, of course. It's a tribute to the day. It's a tribute to themselves. It's a tribute to what happened. Why would you? They'll pose it, of course, as a memorial. But why do you put these beams of light up? A tribute. It's a tribute to the event itself. It's celebrating the event. Of course, they can very easily flip a switch and say, well, they're memorializing and we're remembering, but that's not what they're doing. It's Sade 10 years before, roughly. Cherish the day. It's all about the 7-Eleven, the date of the 7-Eleven job application. Cherish the day. I won't go astray. Cherish the day. Looking forward to it. Of course, that's what when you build the museums, it's all a tribute. And which you can, if anybody ever goes there, you just flip it and say they're crazy. It's a memorial, of course, a somber memorial to the dead. But the example I like to use is pick a supposed, quote, real serial killer. So if that's possible. So I use Hannibal Lecter. Who knows how many of these stories are real? It doesn't matter for the purpose. At some point there's been some weird people that have murdered people in our, this has really happened at some point, whether the big names that are pushed are real or not, whether Son of Sam is real or not. Let's just use Hannibal Lecter. Let's say it's a real person. If Hannibal Lecter found out in his jail cell, Barney was serving him some crackers down there in the pits of that Baltimore mental hospital or something, and he found out, say Hannibal Lecter killed a bunch of people in, let's just say Des Moines, Iowa. Let's just say he killed and ate their livers with some fava beans there, 10 people, and there was a gigantic memorial built. A memorial, just the whole town square with this huge structure. Is it another obelisk, Matt? Yeah, probably would be, but forget it. It doesn't matter what it is. The point is, do you think Hannibal Lecter, when he found out about the gigantic memorial tribute to what he did, do you think he would like that? Or do you think he wouldn't like that? Of course he would love to find out that Des Moines built a gigantic huge megalithic structure for the victims. It would be praising, in a way he would interpret it, at least he would be praising what he did. And that's what all they do with the 7-Eleven museum in Lower Manhattan, and all the tributes and all the statues and all of the they'll have like warped pieces of metal and columns and stuff as all over the world, for the most part, as tributes to the event. It's tributes to themselves for what they were able to do. So the point is, in a long-winded fashion here, he's showing a tribute in the beams of light, and he's showing the balls are the same way in tribute. It's tribute to however they are able to use whatever is going on now to shape the world in a new direction. And no, I wanted to get into it, but it's not appropriate here. I would need to talk at some point. You know what the truth community knows about what's going on now? It can be summed up in one sentence. All the research you've ever done in all the different areas, you know what we really know about what's going on now? We know for sure, as usual, that what is being presented by authority through its minions, through its news, is not what's actually happening. Okay, we know that. But in terms of what it is, who's being affected by it, we don't know anything in that regard. We know one thing, and it's ignorant to say anything else. I don't care if you've done all this research here or there, or Pfizer, people have testified. I don't care about that. It's all part of the reality chase and the breadcrumbs. We know one thing after all this research and all this work and all these rabbit holes. We simply know what is being presented is not what's really happening. Right? That's it. And when you really understand that, you get a sense that the endless chase is pointless, because that's what it wants. It's a reality. It's the way the reality works. It will never truly reveal itself. See how it works? So there's no point to it. There's no point in giving it the energy that it wants. The Slate magazine article, people are like, finally, keeps talking about it. Get to the point. Here we go. Let's see the date on this. By Jeremy Stahl. August 24th. Woo, this is pretty new. Let's say the 25th. Yeah. Spike Lee's new documentary gives a notorious 9/11 conspiracy theorist his biggest platform ever. Isn't that a little his? We got girls over up in here. What? That's boy. These Slate, are you supposed to be like? They could use Z or something, or one of these neutral. Oh boy. Oh boy. I'd like to. I don't. There obviously that image is highly protected, and I can't show that more than a second. But it. Even the guys. This is supposed to be Spike Lee sitting at the NBA draft. Everything is by design. Even the colors that he's wearing. Of course, it's all by design. The way he has his nose isn't being covered. It's over. It's all symbolism, and I can't show that picture anymore because it's protected by the ultra Thanos in terms of the galactic overlord that controls pictures and images. It is I can't even say the name. It's like Voldemort. We'll talk about it some other time on Free Voice. So on Monday, the New York Times reported that Spike Lee devotes a significant amount of time in his new 4-part HBO documentary series, NYC Epicenters, to the group Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which promotes the conspiracy theory, that the Twin Towers were brought down by a controlled demolition as an inside job. Okay. Now, let's just get out of the way what we know for sure. We've all suspected that Richard Gage, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth and all that stuff, he's even used old washed up actors like Ed Asner, I think. He used Ed Asner in some of his videos. And we didn't honestly, I still don't completely understand it other than the same old first grade response of revelation of the method. But we got a sense, of course, that there's no group that could make this much traction on mainstream media. It wasn't covered every day by Whoopi Goldberg and The View and things like that, but it was mainstream enough with Ed Asner and there are pamphlets and flyers, and they were written up. And if you did a search on how many times Architects and Engineers were written up, like in 1,000 different articles over a 15-year period, thought there's no way a regular group could pull that off if they weren't in some way serving the system. But when you looked into the information, maybe it wasn't all the way, or they didn't go into all the places where we would like them to go, but they're putting out a pamphlet that completely shows that what happened to Building 7 isn't possible. I mean, I couldn't have, I still have it probably, the pamphlet on Building 7. I couldn't have designed it any better. It says exactly what happened and how that's just simply not possible. So how can you get upset at a group when they're putting forward, say, a pamphlet on Building 7 exactly in a very, very sound, logical way, saying this couldn't happen? So how do you get upset at them? But at the same time, we sense that in some way they're serving the system, so we just kind of left it alone. And it's still hard to get upset at them. But this now it now takes us to 100% what we know. All right, let's go over the basics. There's 20% of you, most here are old guard, but 20% of you are going to struggle with this. I'm not. Don't do your own research. Trust me on this. I've been through the bog. Let's do your own research. That'll lead you to the Popular Mechanics article. Do your own research. Don't do your own research. Trust me on this, and look at the comments. We're not all insane. Anybody new struggling with this? So when Spike Lee is going to team up, okay, when Spike Lee is going to team up with Richard Gage and Architects and Engineers for the 7/11 job application, when they're going to team up and Spike's going to present that piece, all right, then it's not possible that that group was serving us. Now, that's a whole nother video and discussion. Well, how could it possibly serve the system by exposing that? There's a lot of reasons it could. Okay, one would be knowing that those on the frequency, the NPCs, those that follow, the witches had that army in Wizard of Oz that carried their spears, knowing that everybody on its frequency isn't going to care or notice, and pulling out, identifying all that would push back, identifying the real boy Pinocchios, identifying you and me. There's a lot of reasons why, but the point is, let's just go to the basics. We know now 100%, like somebody's yelling at me from their bathtub, but I can hear you. I got to present this in a certain way. That Richard Gade's group and architects and engineers, as great as the information they put out, in some way serves the system and did the system's bidding. It's confirmed 100%, even if we were 99% sure, because of a kind of a Spike Lee going to it, Spike Lee looking to it for his information, right? Because Spike Lee is not turning over. Well, Matt, can't you just give credit to Spike Lee? Maybe he's turning over a new leaf. Everybody comes into truth on their own time. No, it's not possible. If Spike Lee did somehow break through and he was a real Pinocchio and he wasn't an NPC or a mutant or a servant of the system or a minion of the system, he was true spirit like you and me, and he did say, I can't do this anymore, and now I see how I was used, and he rose up out of his bathtub. If that happened, he would just disappear or something. There would be, or he'd be Randy Quaided. Remember, there was like Randy Quaid, spout. He went pushing all this conspiracy. He supposedly went. Something would happen to Spike. He wouldn't be allowed to make a documentary for HBO. See how that works? So here, thank you, Spike. We know now. If again, I don't stop harping on it, Matt. Move on. We were skeptical of architects and engineers a long time ago. Okay, but now we know for sure. And the only reason is, I keep harping, guys, is some of their materials, again, it's very well done and very convincing. And you'd say, well, this pamphlet is structured the way I would structure it in order to get somebody to see through this. So we'll talk about it some other time. All right, about a decade ago, I interviewed architects and engineers from 9/11 Truth founder Richard Gage multiple times and attended one of his events. What if Matt started to put on events? How would that go? You know what I'm saying? Okay, enough. Move on, Matt. In Slate and Architect magazine, Gage is responsible for peddling some of the, just because they're going to cut him up here, guys, it's all part of the act. Okay. Gage is responsible for peddling some of the most pernicious and long-running lies about the 9/11 attacks, which is why I was surprised that Lee, HBO, and Warner Media might be lending his group any amount of time. Now, this guy who did this article, I'm not going to go back to his name because I'd have to roll over that image that's protected by the Gestapo. He's not being told at the Illuminati window exactly what to say here. Of course, people will follow what the system wants without even understanding it. Of course, people that would write a Slate magazine would completely be on the narrative. They would never have gone off the narrative as what was presented about the 7-Eleven job application, Jay. Just as my friend Tony, every time I've ever talked to him about it, he goes and he runs and finds the Popular Mechanics article that explains it all in 4 pages. It just explains it. I've been over it. There's nothing in the Popular Mechanics article that explains anything. This guy is truly outraged. So it's meant to outrage these complete zombified, hardcore leftist writers for the Atlantic magazine and the Economist and Slate. He's not no one's telling this guy exactly what to say. He is outraged, but that's the point. You think we're used by this system? You think these clowns aren't used? So he says, I had to see for myself to what extent Lee's documentary actually promoted Gage's fantasies. Fantasies! Blasphemy to say anything if you say one thing against what Peter Jennings presents, it's blasphemy. So I checked out a screener for episode 4, although they just have all the ability to go in and see whatever they want before the release date, which is due to be released around the 20th anniversary of the attacks. What I found, he says, was surreal and demoralizing. It was surreal and demoralizing. He don't understand what's going on, this guy. Well, neither do you, Matt. For the most part, you're right, I don't. But this is too revealing. We will absolutely get to the bottom of exactly how this revelation of the method is being used. They can't hide this. I just wanted to jump right into this video before sitting around for hours and trying to figure every little bit out. And we'll have it figured out in the comments section here anyway. Lee devotes 30 minutes near the end to relitigating arguments that have been debunked 1,000 times. Okay. He devotes 30 minutes to arguments that have been debunked 1,000 times. So this is a link, and I actually clicked it. I reviewed this article once, at least the underlined sections, and it takes you to some bullcrap website that's like, I don't know what it's called, like Loose Change is a bunch of bullcrap, or it's some crappy looking website that's like Loose Change is total crap. And that's the the sophisticated source material that this link takes you. Well, Loose Change, a product of Alex Jones, was, as much truth as was revealed in that was also meant to screw the truth movement. It was Loose Change is absolutely a product of the system itself. Okay, if anybody's struggling with that, how could Loose Change be a product of the system? How could a perfectly designed pamphlet of architects and engineers be a product of the system? I need to talk about that some other time. That is not going to be real easy to comprehend for anybody but the old guard. So anyway, let me just go on and on. This guy's up in arms that Spike's going to do this. And in the end, let's see what it says here. Oh, look at this. In the documentary, Lee is presented with an explanation of the facts by Shyam Sundar. Now, this is the guy. This is the NIST guy. They're bringing him back. Do you believe it? I'm not going to keep this on for long. It's the Indian, he's probably American citizen, but of Indian nationality. Indian meaning, Bangalore, Delhi nationality. One of the ultimate frauds of all time from NIST, who came on, in that press conference, that completely contrived press conference. And he did admit, because the truth has to come out, and that's how they gain the most power. He says, we want to admit that in all looking at this in history of steel frame buildings, not one has ever been gone down due to fire. And then he says, not one has ever gone down due to fire. But then he says that they, they have a perfect, a complete understanding in NIST as to what happened. A fire, he says nothing has ever gone down from fire in steel frame buildings. And then I think a few sentences later, he says, it's been many years since I've seen his press conference, saying a fire on one of the floors took out a key support column that led to some domino type free fall collapse, which is, guys, we're not going to go down here again. If a fire, no fire could take out a steel beam in 1,000 years. The steel would burn in a fire and just laugh at the fire. It can't melt. Even if a fire did take out a single key support column, there'd be a tiny little collapse, and the rest of the building, of course, would remain standing. We don't need to do this again. Why the others around us cannot see this, there's a lot of theories, including download, tuned to the frequency, NPC. No point in going there now. They don't see it. They never will be able to see it. So they're recycling Shyam Sundar. I guess Lee, I don't know, because I guess Lee interviews him, I believe. Yeah. You might be wondering why it matters if Spike Lee is raising questions about the official story of 7/11, particularly given that most of the evidence he presents is perhaps most well known at this point because of mocking teen memes from the 2010s. That's all we were able to muster in terms of our evidence against the official story in 2001 in this community. The best we're able to do, according to Slate magazine, is just mocking teen memes of what happened. Oh boy, it is, guys, if you're being infuriated by this, it's meant to infuriate you. Don't give the ether the energy it wants. That's what it's meant to do, whether the writer is in on it or not. So then it's Gage, for instance, considers himself an expert on C, and he said that it's a hoax and blah. That's how they're all tying this all together. It is evil genius, what we're dealing with here, in the extreme. We'll never be a step ahead of it. Worry about yourself and don't give it what it wants. All right? That's all. My wake-up goal is to wake up the truth community to seeing the chase, not people out of this community. 90% of people in this community are completely deluded. And I was going to say, not only giving it what it wants, giving it its most favored pure form of ambrosia, louche, is what this community still gives it. So, and he talks about a certain country in the Middle East taking that's what Gage is focused on them, and they're the bad guy. And then, all right, let's just keep going here. Let's see. I asked, so this big time power player from Slate magazine, I asked representatives from HBO and Warner Media what they and Lee felt about Gage's and other ideas about the 7-Eleven job application, and C, and why these ideas weren't included in the film, or whether or not promoting Gage's work might be leading his viewers to, quote, listen to the wrong people about both catastrophes. And they've yet to respond to me, and I'm just completely I can't believe that these people at HBO and Warner Media haven't replied to me, a little old writer at Slate magazine. Look, guys, it's all bullshit. All right? There's still time, though, before episode 4 airs for Lee to do the right thing, quoting his own movie title, to Lee to do the right thing by excising the 30-minute section from the film, saying it should be in the spirit of free speech. Oh, get this woman off below. In the spirit of free speech, of which they say this country was founded upon, he wants it removed from the documentary, completely taken out. Because, of course, it just promotes damaging and unnecessary conspiracy theories. Guys, it is incredible. The system we're dealing with here is evil genius to the extreme level of which we will never truly fathom. And for the last segment here, for those driving or whatever, I'll just describe the image. Remember, for Free Voice, I covered the Sade video, Cherish the Day. It was, I don't know, like 8 years or something before 2001. And she's singing on top of a high-rise. This is a freeze frame still. Sade's on top of a high-rise, singing Cherish the Day, a day that would come, 8 or 9 years in the future, or whatever. This was just about this time of the Ryder Truck event, or just after, maybe 6 months after the Ryder Truck event. So she's up on the building with her hands held high. In this case, not looking at the WTC buildings off in the background, about a mile away, in Lower Manhattan. She's has her hands up, cherishing the day and praising the Empire State Building, which, of course, the Chrysler Building, the Empire State Building, look exactly like a gigantic King Kong size syringe. And she's praising it, at least at this moment, as I freezed it in the video. The point is, I'm just describing that, guys, you see her with her arms up, kind of bowing down to the Empire State Building, which looks like a syringe, and the WTC is off about a mile in the background. For anybody driving, they can't see this. The point is, we've sensed early on that they need in some way to link the events. And we always said right from the start, even in April of 2020, that what we're going through now with the C is this is 7-Eleven job application part 2. We recognized that, this type of event, we recognized it very early on. But as we've looked at it over time, we see their need for, I don't understand their dark rituals. I don't want to understand, but for their energy, their energy creation, their Wonder Twin powers, how they perform their creepy stuff, they need to link the events. It seems obvious. And they started linking the events even in, you could look back in terms of what we call predictive programming. They were doing it in the Sade video. But it's really overt and obvious in the Spike Lee title of his documentary series. If people are just watching as the normie, must be struggling. Like, well, what's the point? You're all over the place, Spike. Like, what's the point of all this? You have an hour and a half on how the hospitals were overrun and the masks and how he talks to restaurant owners and all the tough times they went through. And then it's about racism and the cops are hunter killers from the Terminator. And then it's going to go eventually to the conspiracy side of the 7-Eleven job application. Like, the normie must be like, what's he trying to do here? Well, he's trying to link the events. And somehow, again, I can sniff it, guys. I don't always understand it, of course, but to create maximum power, energy, their magic, their Wonder Twin powers, appropriate, right? Wonder Twin powers activate to get the most out of this. They need to link the events, or it's almost like to harden, to put the final hardening bit on the cement. They did this gig, then they did this gig, but then it's pretty hard, the cement, but they got to really harden it out, and they got to put a capstone over it. They got to link them somehow. I don't know, but you can sniff it out. There's Spike. I mean, what's the purpose of, in terms of Spike Lee, and he's presenting the current narrative, all that's going on now, and the hospitals being overrun. And what's the point of bringing in this conspiracy stuff about 7-Eleven for part 4 of this series, unless it's absolutely to link the events? And again, if this isn't incredible proof that they need real consciousness to do it, they need real spiritual beings, they need real creators to do it. It's not Spike just making the video in his little, back room where he puts his photos into the water pan in his dark room, or whatever. If he creates a video on its own, that ain't good enough. It has to be the real consciousness that watches this series, for some reason, to harden their cement, needs to start linking the events. Why? I have no idea, but it's pretty obvious. There's no point in Spike even going here. What's the unless they need people to link the events, so that usually, I was going to say, if I wanted to ask you to focus your comments in that area, I should have asked right at the start, but I didn't. A lot of this stuff didn't become apparent to me until I just went through this entire video. But we'll do a separate video perhaps as to why they need to link the events. And this certainly isn't the end of this. There will definitely be a part 2. Thanks, guys.